gracious host, is going to introduce Abigail in 30 seconds, but I first want to give a pitch about how you all can help us send Abigail to Congress. And I tell you, after you listen to her speech, if you don't sign up to canvass and probate, then something's wrong with you. The only way we are going to send this woman to Congress is if we touch every single voter out there by either talking to them or talking to on the phone or at the door. That is what wins races. And after Abigail's done speaking, Cindy and I are going to start circulating with a little sign-up so you can sign up, because Chesterfield is ripe for what we're going to do it this time.
Everyone, friends, family, neighbors, thank you for coming. Harry and I are so excited. I just want to say a couple of things about Abigail's values. I'm a teacher, I boil things down, values, and that is integrity, patriotism, service. 3 words to remember that we remember. And then on the other side, I call it the 3 C's, which is country, constitution, constituents. It is my great pleasure to introduce Abigail Spanberger.
To join me as a speechwriter. Speaking in triplicate, and I love it. My name is Abigail Spanberger. If anybody can't hear me, please let me know, and I'll try to adjust. My name is Abigail Spanberger, and I am the Democratic nominee running for Congress in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. And if anybody wants to know why this race is winnable, I would say look at the pictures from this room. And just for a little bit of a show of hands, who here's from Chesterfield? Okay, who here's not from Chesterfield? We had people come from across the district to this event, and I say thank you. There will be no prize given for the person who drove the longest, but you do have my appreciation. I think it's this gentleman here, Eric, in the front. But my name is Abigail Spanberger. I'm running for Congress because I believe that the role of elected officials in Washington are to represent the people in their districts, to work every single day to create legislation that will improve and create opportunity for people across their district and across the country. And fundamentally, the role of any elected leader, no matter at what level, should be to serve the people who elected them to that position. And my background is one of service. I always knew that I wanted to pursue a career in public service. My father was a career law enforcement officer, a federal agent, and my mother was a nurse, and they always raised us to believe that there was nothing more important than serving the community around you and the people of this country. And so initially I followed directly in my father's footsteps. I became a federal agent. I worked narcotics and money laundering cases with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. I was based in D.C. I worked on the high-intensity drug trafficking area task force, and I loved it. It was exciting. It was interesting. And as a young professional, being in a position where you are knocking on someone's door with the potential to take their things or take their freedom, it is an incredible responsibility. And so when I think of some of the most formative experiences that I have, it's been sitting across the table, being the one explaining to someone or explaining to a family what is happening to them, what is legally going to be moving forward. And I'm a Spanish speaker, so there were oftentimes circumstances where I was the only one in the room who was able to communicate to an individual who was under arrest, or family members who were concerned and scared what was happening. And so when I reflect back on the skills and the experiences that I had as a federal agent, it comes down to responsibility to people across the board, responsibility to all members of our community, regardless of the reason that we are engaging with them. And I want to be responsible to this community. And after a couple of years as a federal agent, my clearances with CIA came through. That was a almost 4-year process. You might be aware I have some security clearances. 2 of them. Yeah, my CIA security clearance came through, and I became a CIA officer. I was a case officer with the CIA. I worked undercover for the entirety of my time with the agency. And in that role, I was working to collect the vital intelligence that would inform our policymakers, our president, our diplomats, and our military on issues of national security. And every single day, we were working to thwart a terrorist threat at home and abroad. And our priority was to serve Americans across this country, people whom we would never meet, because we were driven by the mission of upholding the Constitution and ensuring that we were creating strength in the world, that we were honoring the special place that the United States has in this world, and that we were allowing our president, and I worked under a Democrat and I worked under a Republican, and our policymakers to make the most well-informed decisions possible. And I am running because I believe in information and I believe in informed decision making. And fundamentally, when I think back to my time as a CIA officer, I faced challenges and I faced interesting circumstances. That's the euphemism I like to tell my mother so she didn't worry as much. My mother might have friends in the room.
Yes, she does.
She's everywhere. I did it so that people at a negotiation table, and people trying to create strong relationships with other countries could do so from a point of information, could do so from a position of informed decision making, so that we as a country could be more safe, so that we as a country could have strong relationships with some of our partner nations, and really could have strong information related to some of the adversarial relationships that we might have around the world as well. And back in 2014, I was living on the West Coast. I'd spent time overseas. I'd spent time in D.C., and we were on the West Coast. And we were talking about where we might go next. And we were talking with our oldest daughter. And we said, oh, maybe we'll bid on Nairobi. Maybe we'll bid on San Jose, Costa Rica. Maybe we'll bid on Berlin, Germany. And my daughter said, well, what about Virginia? And we said, what about Nairobi? And my daughter said, but everybody we love lives in Virginia. Why wouldn't we go back to Virginia? And it's a very simple question from a child, a very earnest one, and it really got us thinking. It got me thinking about what it is that long term my husband and I wanted for our children, and how it is that while I was serving this purpose that I believe deeply in, and an agency that does incredible things, and a mission that I think is a powerful one, I also wasn't investing in the community in the same way that I had been raised. I still wasn't building up a community in the way that my parents had done and the example that they set. And because I know my mother has friends in the room, I'll tell this story. In January, I went back to my old high school. I graduated from high school in Henrico County at Tucker High School. And I walked in because my old debate coach is now the principal. And he said, oh my goodness, it's Abby. How are you doing? You're on the cover of Time magazine and you're running for Congress. How is your mother doing? That's not my favorite story. But I think it's that all these years later, the investment in community that my parents modeled for me is really a significant one. And so in 2014, we decided to move back here. I got a job in the private sector. I started a Girl Scout troop. My husband became a soccer coach. I got involved with Moms Demand Action and the Democratic Party as the happy person handing out sample ballots. And I thought that we were all on the right path. And for me, the 2016 election and the lead up to it and the divisive rhetoric that we heard on the way to that election was alarming to me. Because for anyone who's ever served in their community or served a mission, the anger and the divisive language seemed wholly counterproductive to the notion, to the goal of trying to identify problems and working to fix them. Identifying problems and working to find solutions, in the case of a member of Congress, through legislation. And so for me, I started considering how else I could get involved, and I started volunteering on the 2017 elections. And here in Virginia, we saw the impact of volunteers, and even more importantly, people who believed that change could be possible, who got out and voted, and who drove significant change in our House of Delegates. And we as Virginians know what can happen when you do make that significant change. Much of what happened in this past General Assembly is because there were 15 new seats, because there wasn't such a volley between parties, because there was a need for greater discussion, and we got Medicaid expansion, and we got a change in the felony larceny threshold, and we got just a different tenor of a conversation because there was more balance. And I think that's incredibly important. So we as Virginians should know that what can happen when you shift the dynamic of the legislative body. And that's what I intend to do in Congress, and I am so excited that there are so many people across this country who are running, because frankly, it is going to take a significant shift and the blue wave that people talk about of new people coming into Washington, excited to be a part of positive change and excited to be a part of actually creating legislation that impacts people's lives. And our district is a big one. We go from Culpeper to Henrico to Chesterfield to Nottoway County. We've got the western portion of Spotsylvania. It's 10 counties in total. It's a significantly sized district throughout Central Virginia. And what's been interesting as a candidate is the opportunity to travel across the district. And in traveling across the district, recognizing and meeting people and recognizing that people have different concerns across the district, but it does boil down to a couple themes. One, a lot of people talk about the lack of stability in politics. A lot of people talk about the lack of getting things done in Washington. And we need people who are committed to trying to find solutions. My whole career as a CIA officer was focused on finding answers to tough problems so that we could fix situations. In order to go out on your own as a case officer, you have to be flexible, you have to be resourceful, and we need people in Congress who are not dug in on their positions and who are willing to have conversations with people with whom they may disagree. And I will say there's already reason to have hope, because there are people in Congress, in particular there's a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, and it's a group of Democrats and Republicans who get together and try and focus on how it is that they might best solve some of the largest, most pressing issues facing our country. And it's a small group of people, but as we have an influx of new people into Congress, ideally there will be a critical mass of people who are committed to trying to address change, who are committed to trying to ensure that we are getting things done in Washington for the American people. And across the district, healthcare is the #1 issue that people talk about. It's the rising cost of insurance, it's rising cost of premiums, it's the rising cost of prescription drug medicines, and it impacts people's lives in every way. And people are concerned about what opportunities exist for their children, be they in elementary school all the way up through high school. Because if a kid graduates from high school and he or she isn't going on to college, what opportunities exist? Are they graduating from high school in a place where they're going to be able to get meaningful work and earn a living that can support themselves and potentially a family? And for those who do go to college, are they going to be saddled with debt when they graduate? You know, these are questions that people have real concerns about, because it impacts the strength of the family's personal economy and our own ability to pursue the American dream and our own ability to participate in our community. And these are the issues that are incredibly important to me, and because it's impactful in people's lives. And so I thank you all for being here. I thank you for being engaged in this race. I thank you for being interested in my candidacy. And I truly, truly want you all to know that our campaign is working as hard as we possibly can. We have an incredible team behind us. And this race is winnable. And we have seen at the state level what that means. And so for me, it is so much more motivating for us to be able to think of what can happen in the future when we really do bring a critical mass of change to Washington. And so I will end it there and do a couple questions. With a group this large, I don't want to necessarily bore people too long with questions. But again, I would like to thank you all for being here, and I would especially like to thank our hosts. It is because of the generosity of hosts who have opened their homes, who have extended invitations to their network of friends and peers, that we have been able to build a campaign like this. We started back in July, meeting people in kitchens and dining rooms, and at that time it was closer to 25, 30 people than the massive number of people here tonight. And it's because people bit by bit got excited. And so I thank you all for being here, and I would make a couple requests. As you go out into the community, talk about the race, talk about politics. I think we as a community need to get back to a place where we can have just a normal conversation about basic differences without it coming into a point where families aren't doing Thanksgiving together anymore. And so where we can all lead by example here, I think that it's a really important piece and a really important effort. And if you're interested in putting a literal stake in the ground in terms of your politics, we have yard signs, so please take everyone on your way out. Are we out already?
No.
So we have we have more. You can also request them on our website. They are free. We are happy to have them spread around the community. So if you request them on their website, they'll be delivered to your home. And if anyone's interested in volunteering, we always need more door knockers. Trying to get a little inter-county rivalry. I'll say this: we have more canvassers in Henrico than we have in Chesterfield. But I thank you all for being here very, very much. And Kayla, do you want to moderate questions?
I'm a high school teacher, and I'm wondering what you think. Yeah, I know. I'm wondering what you think the issue is where you and the congressman are different, that can totally don't connect.
The number one issue is gun violence. At least in my, well, gun violence and net neutrality, I think are the top issues that among younger voters, and if you disagree with me, younger voters, please let me know. But these are the top issues that younger voters, and I say high school students on up to mid-20s frequently talk about. So I visited a high school and I had a young woman who was a 10th grader ask me about the stability of Social Security long term.
I'm not taking care of my parents.
She wanted to be prepared.
Not so much a question as a plea. I'd like you to pull that out where you talk about Nancy.
Okay.
She has devoted her life to putting country first. She's the first woman to come into the House. And from the time she got there, she's been trashed by Republicans as some kind of symbol of divisiveness. And I don't think she deserves that from Republicans.
She does not. They hate her because she was so good at her job.
If you support a different leader, I have no problem with that. I have none. I have a problem with campaigning and using her name as part of the problem. She doesn't deserve that.
And I will say this, I have tremendous respect for Nancy Pelosi. The fact that I am standing here today running for Congress is because of women like Nancy Pelosi, chief among them, Nancy Pelosi. But I think we've reached a point where we do need new individuals leading the conversation. And that doesn't mean that she hasn't been a strong leader, and that doesn't mean that she will continue to bring tremendous value to Congress. But I do personally believe that we do need new leadership driving the conversation. And I thank you for challenging me on that. And I respect your opinion very much. And I, in fact, thank you for standing up for a woman like Pelosi, because I hope that someday people hate me for being elected.
Then please, drop the ad and focus on something else.
Basically, I like the ad because it shows that she's not going to go with the status quo, that she's willing to be separated from things. All I think.
I actually want to thank you for that response. I just respectfully disagree with that. I agree with your opinion entirely. And that's one of the reasons I showed up tonight. So I wanted to hear it out of your mouth, what you had to say. Okay, and TV ad is a TV ad. We're in a, as you, I hate to say it, you've been, congratulations, you're important now, you've been swift voted. You know, and it's hard to campaign in districts like this that are kind of gerrymandered and kind of split between very conservative, very liberal. So I wanted to say that, but I do have a question again about how you're going to approach, assume you win, how are you going to approach your first year coming into a Congress that is very, I'm going to use the word disingenuous. And how do you see your role in helping kind of getting us back on track with the country?
So I think that the entering class of new elected members of Congress who will be arriving in January have maybe a once-in-a-generation opportunity to start, just by virtue of the anticipated numbers, start from day one with, I'll say power in numbers, though I don't necessarily mean power in numbers, because I believe there will be many members of Congress. Having had the opportunity to meet many of the candidates running across this country, many of whom I think are incredible people who are measured and pragmatic and tempered and want to serve this country and who want to get us back on track and go back to whatever sort of, delightful livelihood they have been pursuing. So I think that while I am not naive in any way to the challenges that exist, because Washington is Washington, to kind of use that terminology, I do think that there will be a critical mass of people and that will have the potential, if they use it correctly, to insist upon changing what is considered the way we've always done it. And I do not think, I don't think it should be a bad word to work across the aisle. I don't think it should be a problem if you look for bipartisanship. I'm a Democrat, I've always been a Democrat, but this is a 50-50 district. And when I win, there will probably be about 48% of the district that didn't vote for me. And I have a responsibility to represent them. And what's amazing about the way our country is split up is there are people who, win their elections with 70% of their vote and they have a different mandate. And so there should be that push and pull. And I don't think that, my position as being someone coming from the 7th district should have to change because I go into a caucus where other people might have 70% of their vote at home. And in fact, on the Republican side, there are people who will be in the same exact position as me, and ideally there will be places where we can find common ground. And one of the issues that I think is a tremendous issue that will allow for potential engagement across the aisle is infrastructure, in particular broadband internet. We're in Chesterfield, but in 7 of our 10 counties, there are tremendous issues gaining access to reliable, high-speed internet. And it's an economic issue, it's an educational issue, it's a healthcare issue as telemedicine continues to grow. And so this, to me, is the perfect place where, regardless of what your political party is, if you're from a rural area or represent a rural area, you should be able to come to the table and say, how can we work to incentivize or grow or create a mechanism or an opportunity where we can expand broadband internet access to many of our districts. So a long answer to say I'm well aware that it will be hard, but I think that there's actually a chance this year that is unique to where we are as a country, where people can force the conversation to be more effective and more aimed at problem solving. I mentioned the Problem Solvers Caucus earlier. It shouldn't actually be such a special entity. It should really just be what Congress is. But until we get there, I think it's important to have that mindset.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is why I let her pick the questions.
I would like to hear a little bit about your view on immigration. I know that you've been all over the world, and I came here in '79 and made that decision. I'm not sure I will make the same decision 40 years later. So how do you look at it?
That's heartbreaking, actually. It's heartbreaking. Because, it's heartbreaking because the strength and the growth of this country since we started has been due to immigration. We have been a land where people who are adventurers and people who are entrepreneurs and risk takers come here, leaving potentially everything behind to create something new in this country. And I believe it's that spirit that has led us to be the country that we are. And I think as we continue to politicize immigration in the way that we have seen, particularly in the past couple of years, we are denigrating that history, and we are not remembering what has in fact made us strong. So often the discussion of border security and immigration becomes very conflated, which I think is a troublesome way to have the conversation. As a former CIA officer, I worked counter-narcotics, I worked narco-trafficking issues related to South America. I am the first among us to recognize that we need strong border security, be it at the southern border, be it at points of entry. But that is separate from discussions related to immigration and how it is that we as a country want to welcome and do welcome people who want to come here to study, to visit, or to make a life here. And so there have been successful efforts on a bipartisan basis to create legislation that will address border security issues in a meaningful way and also honor our history as a nation of immigrants and create policies that ensure that people can continue coming here, that we are growing our economy, that we are doing so in a lawful manner, that we are enabling the country to know who's coming here, that we are allowing new Americans to come in and add to our economy and add to our communities. There was a bill on the Senate side a couple of years ago that passed. It would have passed in the House if it had gone before a vote, but Speaker Boehner at the time wouldn't even bring it to a vote. We listened this past winter and spring about immigration issues, and in fact, there was a great bill called the Hurd-Aguilar bill is the name for it. It's a bipartisan bill. Republican and Democrat put it together, and it addressed issues related to the Dreamers, providing a path of what opportunities exist for the Dreamers. It provided to the fact that industry needs new Americans. We continue to need new people to come and work in skilled labor jobs, in high-tech industries, and in agricultural and hospitality jobs. And we need to recognize that immigration is part of a vital portion of our community. And making it a political issue where we're vilifying people that truly wanted to follow the same path of opportunity that my entire family followed, to me, is unconscionable, and it's an oversimplification of what is actually a significant issue that we need to address through legislation.
One more question?
Hi, I'm Andrea Wright.
Hi.
I had a question regarding addiction and recovery issues. As we all know, the opiate epidemic is really out of control, and we see people overdosing every day. It was 2 hours ago I read Mac Miller, a famous music artist, overdosed and died. And so as someone that's concerned about healthcare, and obviously you saw on the front lines of the drug policy and the drug trade, how would you propose handling drug addiction here? How would you help in the recovery community, which is a community that hasn't been given a lot of support?
So, chief among the things that we as a community need to be doing, and legislatively from the position of focus from Congress, is we need to recognize that substance use disorder is a mental health issue, and we need to continue to ensure that people have access to mental health resources so that if they are suffering from a substance use disorder, they can get the help that they need, recognizing that it is a mental health issue. We also need to recognize that there are communities who are not equipped to deal with the scope and the unfortunate size of this epidemic. And so there's actually a good bill before Congress that would provide significant funding to localities to help address the needs of local law enforcement, because what so unfortunately frequently happens is people come across law enforcement radar, but then they don't get the substance use treatment that they need, and the recidivism rates continue to be high among those who have a substance use disorder. And so there's a bill before Congress that would provide significant funding to localities, to states and localities that need it. And what's interesting about this particular bill is that it's over a 5-year period of time. And so frequently when the government does allocate or earmark money for particular issues such as the opioid crisis, it's done in a short-term period of time. But when you're looking at something like the opioid crisis, it will take years to right this ship, and we need the stability, communities need the stability of knowing that they can depend on additional funding from the federal government to help ensure that their recovery locations and housing has the funding that it needs, and that as people are transitioning back into the community, that they have the resources that they need. And frankly, there's been a lot done in recent years in terms of educating physicians about the risk related to prescription opiates and how that is a pipeline and gateway later towards heroin or other pill use. But there's still a lot of education that can be done within our communities, particularly within high schools. And while that's more of a local issue, and certainly it's happening in many places, I think it's an important thing that anyone in the community, regardless of whether you're a locally elected official or a federally elected official, to even be talking about it, to continue the conversation about how it can happen to anyone and how so frequently and unfortunately it does.
Did they hold the pharmaceutical companies responsible in any way? Like, do they have to help fund any of the problem
In that
they
particular
created?
bill, no.
They should. Thank you so much for your questions and for coming out. And just we had over 109 people show up today, so I just want to thank you. Incredible turnout, and I hope you see you again.
Thank you.